I was 41 years old, sitting in my car outside a flight school, hands shaking on the steering wheel, thinking, everyone in there is going to be half my age. I almost drove away. I didn't. Today I fly commercial jets for a living. If you've ever typed, "Am I too old to become a pilot?" into a search bar at 2 in the morning, this video is for you. Stick around because the answer might surprise you. Hey, I'm Captain Alex. I've been flying professionally for close to a decade now, and before that, I spent 20 years in a completely different career that had nothing to do with airplanes. I'm 50 years old right now, recording this video, and I still climb into a cockpit and fly people across the country and sometimes across oceans. I get messages every single week from people asking some version of the same question. I'm 35, is it too late? I'm 42, should I even try? I'm almost 50, am I crazy for thinking about this? And I get it. There's this idea floating around that pilots start young, that if you didn't get your license at 20, the door is basically closed. I believed that too once. It kept me from even looking into it for years. So here's what I want to do in this video. I want to give you the real numbers, the real age limits, my own story of starting later than most, the honest challenges you'll face, and a real step-by-step path if you decide to go for it. No sugarcoating, no fake motivational nonsense. Just the truth from someone who actually lived it. Before we get into it, drop your current age in the comments below. I'm serious, actually type it. By the end of this video, I want you to look at that number differently. And if this is the kind of content that helps you, hit subscribe now, because I'm building this channel like a flight crew, and I want you on board for the rest of the journey. Alright, let's get into it. Let's clear up the confusion first, because most of the fear around this topic comes from not actually knowing the rules. Here's the truth. There's no upper age limit to start training as a pilot. None. You can begin your private pilot training at 20, at 35, at 50, even at 65 if you really wanted to. The aviation authorities don't care how old you are when you walk into a flight school and pay for your first lesson. Now, where age does come into play is at the very top, specifically for airline captains and first officers flying large commercial aircraft. In most countries, including the United States, the mandatory retirement age for airline pilots flying those big commercial jets is 65. In some countries it's slightly different, sometimes 60, but the international standard that most of the world follows caps it at 65 for that specific type of flying. So here's the math that changes everything. If you start training at 40, you could still have 25 years of a flying career ahead of you before that retirement age even becomes relevant. If you start at 50, you've still got 15 years. That's a full career in almost any other industry. There's also a common myth that you need to hold an airline transport pilot license by a certain age or you're locked out. That's not true either. There's no age cutoff for earning that license itself. The age limit applies to when you can act as a pilot on certain commercial operations, not when you're allowed to get certified. People also confuse pilot age limits with military pilot age limits, which are much stricter because of the physical demands of fighter jets and combat flying. Civilian and commercial aviation is a completely different world with completely different rules. So if part of your fear came from hearing about military cutoffs, you can let that go right now. It doesn't apply to you. The bottom line on this section is simple. The legal system is not what's stopping you. It never was. What stops most people is something else entirely, and we're going to talk about that honestly in a bit. But first, let me tell you my own story, because I think it'll help you see this from the inside instead of just from the rulebook. I didn't grow up dreaming of being a pilot the way some people do. I know a lot of pilots who say they knew since they were 6 years old, staring up at planes, building model airplanes in their bedroom. That wasn't me. I actually spent 2 decades working in a completely unrelated field, a steady job, a mortgage, a family to take care of. Flying was something I loved as a hobby, something I'd occasionally think about but never seriously pursued. Then I hit my late 30s and something shifted. I remember sitting at my desk one afternoon, looking out the window at a plane crossing the sky, and thinking, I'm going to be 60 someday, and I'm going to wonder why I never even tried. That thought wouldn't leave me alone. It sat in the back of my mind for almost 2 years before I did anything about it. 2 years. I want you to sit with that, because a lot of people think I just woke up one day and made a bold decision. I didn't. I was scared. I had responsibilities. I had a voice in my head telling me I was too old, too settled, too far along in life to start something completely new from scratch. I finally made the call to a local flight school when I was 41. In that moment I mentioned at the start of this video, sitting in my car outside the building, that was real. I almost turned around. I remember thinking about walking into a classroom full of people who could be my kids. I remember thinking about the money it would cost, the years it would take, whether I'd even be physically capable of passing the medical exams at my age, but I walked in anyway. And here's the first thing that surprised me. I wasn't the only one. There was a woman in her late 30s switching careers from finance. There was a man in his 40s who'd spent his whole life as a teacher and decided this was his second act. Yes, there were some 20-year-olds too, fresh out of high school, and that's fine, that's normal. But the flight school was far more mixed in age than I ever expected. The training itself was hard. I won't lie to you about that. I was juggling family responsibilities, a mortgage, and now flight lessons and studying on top of it. There were nights I'd be up late reading about aerodynamics and airspace regulations after already working a full day. There were financial sacrifices my family and I had to make together. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some movie montage. It was slow, grinding, consistent effort over years. The turning point for me, the moment I stopped doubting myself, was actually during my very first solo flight. Sitting alone in that cockpit, lifting off the ground by myself for the first time, something clicked. I remember thinking, I did this. At my age, with everything going on in my life, I actually did this. That feeling stayed with me through every hard exam, every expensive certification, every moment I wanted to quit. It took me longer than the 22-year-olds sitting next to me in ground school. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I got there. And today, flying is not just my job, it's proof to myself that the timeline other people expect from you doesn't have to be your timeline. Now here's something that took me a long time to understand, and I really want you to hear this part clearly. Starting later in life isn't just something you have to overcome. In a lot of ways, it actually works in your favor. Let's talk about discipline first. Flight training is not just about learning to fly a plane. It's about memorizing regulations, understanding weather systems, mastering checklists, staying calm under pressure, and being incredibly consistent with study habits. When you're older, you've usually already built these skills through decades of work experience, raising a family, managing responsibilities. Younger students sometimes have to learn discipline from scratch. You've already got it. Next, let's talk about maturity under pressure. Flying involves making calm decisions in high-stress situations. If you've spent 20 or 30 years navigating job pressures, financial stress, family emergencies, or difficult bosses, you've already trained your nervous system to handle stress without panicking. That's an enormous advantage in a cockpit. Instructors will actually tell you that older students often handle emergency simulations with more composure than their younger classmates, simply because they've lived through more real-life pressure already. Then there's financial stability. This one's practical but important. Flight training is expensive, and one of the biggest struggles younger students face is funding it while also trying to build a life, pay rent, and figure out their 20s. If you're older, there's a good chance you're in a more stable financial position, whether that's savings, home equity, or simply a steady income that allows you to fund training without falling apart financially. Life experience also makes you a better communicator, and communication is huge in aviation. You're constantly talking to air traffic control, coordinating with a co-pilot, managing passengers, working with ground crews. Decades of professional and personal experience naturally make you sharper at reading people and communicating clearly under pressure. I've also talked to hiring managers at regional airlines, and here's something important they told me directly. They are not scanning resumes looking for the youngest candidate. They're looking for reliability, maturity, strong decision-making, and a track record of responsibility. An older candidate with a solid work history, even from a completely different industry, often stands out in a good way. It shows commitment and stability, two things every airline wants in the people flying their planes. So instead of thinking about your age as a disadvantage you need to fight against, I want you to start seeing it as a set of tools you already have that younger students are still trying to build. Now I promised you honesty in this video, so let's talk about the real challenges, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's all smooth sailing. It's not. First, the medical requirements. To become a commercial pilot, you need to pass an aviation medical exam, and the standards get more detailed as you get older. Things like blood pressure, vision, cardiovascular health, all of that gets checked carefully. I'm not saying this to scare you. Most people in reasonably good health pass these exams without issue, even in their 40s and 50s. But if you've been neglecting your health for years, this is your sign to start taking it seriously before you begin training. Get a checkup. Know where you stand early so there are no surprises later. Second, let's talk about physical stamina. Flying, especially during training, can involve long hours, early mornings, and mental fatigue from intense studying. It's not physically brutal like some jobs, but it does require sustained focus and energy. I noticed I needed to manage my energy more carefully than some of my younger classmates. I had to prioritize sleep, exercise, and pacing myself in a way I probably didn't think about as much when I was younger. Third, the financial investment. I'm not going to pretend this is cheap, because it isn't. Between flight hours, ground school, exams, and certifications, the total cost of becoming a commercial pilot can be a significant financial commitment, often running well into the tens of thousands of dollars depending on the path you choose and where you live. If you're starting later in life, you likely have more financial obligations too: a mortgage, kids, other responsibilities. This means you need a real financial plan, not just enthusiasm. Fourth, and this one's personal, balancing training with family and work responsibilities. When you're 22 and single, you can throw yourself completely into flight training. When you're 45 with a family, you have to be strategic. I had conversations with my family before I even started about what this would mean for our time together, our finances, our schedule. Their support made an enormous difference, and I'd encourage you to have those honest conversations early too, rather than trying to hide the sacrifice from the people closest to you. Finally, let's address the mental side. There will be moments of self-doubt. There will be days you compare yourself to younger students and feel behind. I felt that constantly in the beginning. The way I got through it was by focusing only on my own timeline, not anyone else's. Comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10 is a losing game. You have to run your own race. These challenges are real, but every single one of them is manageable with the right planning and mindset. Let's talk about exactly how to build that plan. All right, if you've made it this far, I'm guessing you're seriously considering this. So let's get practical. Here's the actual roadmap I'd give anyone starting later in life. Step 1, get your medical exam done first. Before you spend a single dollar on flight lessons, go get an aviation medical exam from a certified aviation medical examiner. This tells you immediately if there are any health concerns to address. It's the foundation everything else depends on, so don't skip this or push it off. Step 2, research flight schools carefully. Not all flight schools are the same. Some specialize in fast-track training for people aiming for the airlines quickly. Others offer a more flexible, part-time schedule, which might suit you better if you're working another job or managing family responsibilities. Visit a few in person if you can. Talk to current students, especially ones closer to your age, and ask about their real experience. Step 3, understand the license progression. You'll typically start with a private pilot license, which lets you fly for personal use. From there, you build flight hours and move into an instrument rating, which teaches you to fly using instruments in poor visibility. Then a commercial pilot license, which allows you to be paid to fly. Eventually, for airline jobs specifically, you'll work toward that airline transport pilot license, which requires a significant number of flight hours, often built up through jobs like flight instructing or charter flying in the early years. Step 4, build your flight hours strategically. This is often the part that takes the longest. Many pilots build hours by becoming flight instructors themselves after getting their commercial license. It's actually a great path because you're getting paid, gaining valuable experience, and building the hours you need simultaneously. Other options include banner towing, aerial survey work, or small charter operations. Step 5, target regional airlines first. Most pilots, regardless of age, don't start at a major international airline. They build experience at regional airlines first. These regional carriers are often more open to a wider age range of new hires because what they value most is your certifications, your flight hours, and your reliability, not how old you are. Now let's talk timeline honestly, because I know you're wondering. If you start from zero with no flying experience at all at say 45 years old, and you train consistently, you could realistically be flying commercially maybe with a regional airline within about 2 to 4 years. Depending on how intensely you're able to train and how quickly you build hours, it's not an overnight process, but it's also not the decade-long journey some people imagine either. A few practical tips to manage the cost and time. Consider part-time or accelerated programs based on your life situation, not what everyone else is doing. Look into financing options specifically designed for flight training. Some flight schools partner with lenders who understand this career path and connect with online communities of pilots who started later in life. I promise you there are more of us than you think, and hearing from people who have walked this exact path is incredibly valuable. I want to share a few quick stories with you, people I've met along this journey, because sometimes hearing about others makes it feel more real than just hearing my own story. There was a man I met during my training who had spent nearly 25 years working as an engineer. He started flight training at 46 after his kids had grown up and moved out. He told me the hardest part wasn't the flying itself, it was silencing the voice that told him engineers don't become pilots at his age. He's now flying for a regional airline and says it's the most fulfilled he's felt in his career in years. I also met a woman who had been a nurse for almost 2 decades. She started her private pilot license at 43, originally just as a personal challenge, something for herself after years of taking care of everyone else. She fell in love with it, kept going, and eventually earned her commercial license. She now flies charter routes and says her medical background actually made her incredibly calm and methodical in emergency training scenarios. And then there was a former military logistics worker, not a pilot, just someone who managed supply chains, who started training at almost 50. Everyone around him, including his own family at first, thought it was a strange time to start something so demanding. He pushed through anyway, built his hours as a flight instructor for a few years, and is now flying commercially. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, "The only difference between me and the 25-year-olds in my class was that I had 30 extra years of reasons to believe I couldn't do it, and I had to unlearn every single one of them." That thread runs through every single story like this that I've come across. It was never really about age. It was about whether someone was willing to unlearn the idea that their timeline had already closed. So let's go back to the question in the title of this video. Am I too old to become an airline pilot? Here's my honest answer, after living this myself and after 9 years flying professionally. The legal system doesn't stop you. Your body, for most people in reasonably good health, doesn't stop you. The airlines themselves value the maturity and stability that come with age. The only real thing that stops people is hesitation, the same hesitation I felt sitting in my car outside that flight school all those years ago. You don't have to decide today whether you're going to become a pilot, but I hope this video at least gives you permission to stop believing the myth that your window has closed. It hasn't, not at 35, not at 42, not at 50. The sky genuinely does not check your ID for wrinkles. It just asks if you're willing to show up and put in the work. If this video helped shift something in the way you think about your own timeline, do 2 things for me. First, subscribe to this channel because I'm going to keep sharing real, honest content about aviation careers, what it actually takes, and answering the questions people are too afraid to ask. Second, drop a comment below telling me the age you'd start at if fear wasn't part of the equation, and share this video with anyone you know who's ever said, "I think it's too late for me." It's not too late, I'm proof of that. I'll see you in the next video. This is Captain Alex signing off.